is Shane Fisher. I'm an evangelist for the Church of Christ.
And I'm David Fanning, evangelist of the Church of Christ and also a promoter of thegospelofchrist.com.
And welcome back, and we're doing a series of lessons on personal evangelism for every Christian. And so what we've been looking at is what David came up with was called the PET program, Personal Evangelism Team, in which we go out and do door-to-door campaigns. And what we were talking about, David, is, of course, this is for every Christian.
Absolutely.
And we also talked about how many times a year do we need to do this?
Well, of course, it depends on what your purpose, no doubt, is. But now, when I first initially put together the Personal Evangelism Team when I was a teenager, we worked out a weekly program. Now, you have to decide how many weeks you want to go in order to implement the program. But the whole idea is that you're meeting together, usually on a Saturday morning, and you're coming together as far as your goal, as to what you want to try to accomplish when you go out into the community. And then you come back for lunch, and you talk about the different things you went through, which is a good thing, because some people are like, well, I got bit by a dog, or somebody, cussed me out. I mean, unfortunately, those things happen. And
yeah.
So, and others like, man, I had a Bible study, or, somebody said this, and I didn't know how to answer that, this is a really good educational thing. And at the same time, you and I talked about the fact that so many times people choose fear over faith. When you have a team, and obviously you go out by twos, then as a result, you kind of build more strength. And then when you come together as a whole and say, okay, here's where our experience is. Well, I had that experience too, or how did you handle this experience? Then you learn quickly, you get more encouraged, you get more bold. Yeah. You get more bold. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's so important not to just do maybe a once a year, door campaign. Yeah. I can tell you that when I started college, I actually helped a congregation in Nashville, and it was at one time it was in a community that was somewhat affluent, but it became more of a situation where there were the lower income situations coming on, and the congregation was literally, it was drying up big time. And so I brought the Personal Evangelism Team program into the congregation there, and we started knocking doors every Saturday, and I'm telling you what, we started building that congregation back up. The trouble was I only had 6 months before I was going to go to another college. And as a result, they didn't continue it on, Yeah. So I'd already demonstrated to them, this is not David Fanning's formula or Shane Fisher's formula. This is Ephesians 4:11 through 16. When you have every member of the Lord's church doing his or her share, or at least some, then this is going to cause, eventually, over time, it's going to cause growth of the body. It's for sure going to cause spiritual growth, but also at some point it'll cause numerical growth as well. And so it's like anything else. You get out what you put into something. So if somebody's not going to put, I'm just going to do this once a year, well, then you're going to get some kind of return, so to speak, for that, just doing it once a year. But if you do it every week for, maybe 2 or 3 months, then you're going to get a huge result.
Yeah, we actually went twice to the Northeast and did for 2 to 3 months going up there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And of course, that's when you make the big differences, This idea of let's have a gospel meeting, for 3 days, or let's have a gospel meeting even for a week, or let's have a tent meeting for 2 weeks, which there's a few people that do that. Those are very effective. But when you're talking about every week for several months, that really is when things start picking up in a big way.
You see, David, when I see you doing personal evangelism, that helps strengthen me.
Absolutely.
To do it. So that's why, 1 Corinthians 11, verse 1, imitate me as I also imitate Christ. Paul was the man. He was... Oh, yeah. He was a great missionary.
And that's one of the things that when I got into the Scripture, as a teenager, and I looked at the book of Acts, and I saw that Acts 20:20, and he preached from house to house. Mm-hmm. And then I saw Acts 8, verses 3 to 4, where you had men and women both, even though they were persecuted, they were scattered, and they went everywhere sharing the gospel. It's like, well, that inspires me. So not just you and I inspiring each other, but also you go to the Scriptures and you say that's the way they did, and it just you're doing what the Bible says you should do, Mm-hmm. And the thing is, it's like, we've mentioned this before in lessons before, over 70% of our young people, once they leave high school, they leave the church, and most of them do not return.
Yeah.
If they were engaged in these types of things, I think still a lot of the things that are going right now would cause a lot of them, it'd still be a high statistic, because the way society is right now and the way things are right now. But the stronger your congregation, the stronger your family unit, and the more evangelistic, I think the better chance you have to keep
From the personal experience of me being, so to speak, young, I have found that if a young Christian is engaged, working in the church, given something to do, they're more, they're more active. They're not passive.
Right.
And that's more of a, of a thing of, I'm actually participating in something that's worthwhile, so to speak.
And again, it needs to be something that has true productivity involved. In other words, what I mean by that is, if a young person takes out the trash, that's great.
Yeah.
I would even bring this up, and I know this will be controversial, but if they're learning puppets or whatever, I mean, the fact of the matter is if they are actually with a human being and they're actually sharing the gospel with a human, that's going to be what's affecting them, because that's what changed me, and that's what you're saying was a big part of what changed you, is when you're in your school and you're sharing the gospel and you've got a fellow student who obeys the gospel. I mean, there's no substitute for that personal experience. And so that gives you a strong conviction, because you see the power of the gospel actually at work, and you didn't have the great ability. You just knew that, fortunately the person was receptive. You just shared the gospel affected that individual. They obeyed the gospel. And I'm telling you, it's just awesome. So one of the attitudes I've always had too, and this is, from when I was a teenager up till, obviously I'm in my 50s now, is I want to learn from Shane, because Shane has had some experiences I haven't had. So, when you do this personal evangelism team stuff, there's some things that Shane might come up or think about or whatever, and I'm like, man, I never thought about that, or, and then we end up coming off of each other, with that, and that helps to build us up as well. So this idea of imitate me as I imitate Christ, that's huge right there.
Then this program also fulfills Galatians 6:10. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good unto all men, especially those of the household of faith. So we're meeting those spiritual needs of the community.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that's so important. You're out there primarily to save a soul, but while you're in the community, what's going to happen is you're going to find people who, man, they can't pay their utility bill, or they're at the last leg. Now you got to be careful with that. I remember going back to the experience I had in Nashville, where this one lady brought her 3 children, and she just looked all terrible, as far as the way she's dressed and all that, on purpose, by the way. We didn't know this at the time. And what she was doing was she's trying to have us give her some food, and at the time you could exchange food for money, and at the same time we gave her a little cash too, which was a big no-no. But we're just trying to help her, right? And come to find out, she took all that money because she had her children come and approach us, and they're all young and pitiful looking and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, they had us, pretty convinced. So we really loaded her up, and come to find out later, she sold all that stuff and got drugs and what have you. So you got to be really careful with that kind of thing, but don't let that discourage you, because that doesn't erase the scripture. The scripture still says in Matthew 25, I was hungry and you fed me not. And really, when you think about Matthew 25, that's the sin of omission, the idea that you should do it and you're not doing it. And it mentions very clearly that was the ones who did not make it to heaven in Matthew 25. And so we got to remember that the sin of omission is just as powerful as the sin of commission. And evangelism and benevolence both are important. So you will have opportunities in your community where the benevolence thing will come into play, and whatever you can do. Now, I obviously don't give money is normally a number one for sure, but try to help somebody. Provide transportation for them to get to church. Take them to the hospital. Go visit them at the hospital. There's so many opportunities you'll find out while you're doing the personal evangelism, and when you get into those things, that's going to open up huge doors for evangelistic opportunities.
Yeah. So we want to talk more about setting up this PET program, and David, talk to us about the initial materials.
Okay. Yeah, I brought some of those. In fact, this goes all the way back to when I first started doing this type of thing. Here I'm a teenager, and I've never done this before, and I can remember actually going to one of our Bible colleges, one of the smaller Bible colleges in Alabama, just to get with one of the professors there, and I said, because I knew he was extremely evangelistic and did a ton of door campaigns, and at the time, again, I was working with a congregation in Nashville, and I wanted to do this type of thing even more, and I said, what do I need to do? And you know what he told me?
What?
David, you know what to do. and that's all he had to tell me. David, you know what to do. In other words, you got the desire to do it and you want to do it, so go do it. So I basically developed my own program, and that's one thing I want to encourage you. If you got initiative, if you got creativity, just go ahead and put it in there, or get with somebody who might have, or use what we have. I mean, there's no set method or whatever, but like for instance, I have this Contact for Christ I came up with, and again, if you could see this, I mean, this is old typing stuff there,
Mm-hmm.
and I made it where I could copy it off a copy machine so that it wouldn't, be cost effective. I've always been real conscientious of that, ever since I started evangelism, trying to make everything to where it's duplicatable, where it's very affordable, So I made it. Of course, we have computers now, but back then I didn't have the computer type stuff. So
we had these contact cards on index.
When I first got involved with Door Campaign, I saw those things, where you got basically, where it goes in. If you write it out, it gives you like 3 parts or something. But those are expensive. Yeah, they're very expensive. So I'm thinking, man, I don't want this to be, a deterrent. So I did this, and I got on the title of here, it says Contact for Christ. So here you're going to the door. And then what you'll do after you're through is you'll fill this Contact for Christ card out. So you want to make sure you have a bunch of those, get ready to go.
As far as I'm concerned, you used to bring a notebook, really. Just write down people's information.
Well,
right?
Sure, yeah. I mean, you could do that. You could. The thing is that when you do a door campaign, if you're a team, obviously, you want to report that information. So that's one of the reasons why you do this. But yeah, you're right. I mean, if you're just doing it you and somebody else.
If somebody doesn't have the finances is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So... And again, like I said, you could make it very cost effective by just simply making copies like that, and then basically what I had when it comes to the packets and all is I made sure that you had about like 100 contact cards. So that's what I'm talking about here, Contact for Christ, where it has their name, address. I actually have appraisal of the prospect. Was it very good? Was it fair? Was it a possible interest? Comments about the conversation. If you had a study, comments about the study. What you think their age might be, maybe their religious background, if they have children, what the ages the children are, maybe get their phone number. The dates contact, I got several different brackets here where it shows, where you can put down the date. Then you want to go back, put another date down, put more comments down. You got to keep it brief, no doubt. But the point is that when you do this, you're going to see so many people. You're going to go to so many doors, and you got to remember who it was, where you went, what the conversation, because you'll forget pretty easily. And that's one of the reasons, and we'll talk about this more in just a moment, about the idea of a silent partner, where you're up there, you're speaking, the silent partner, they're the ones that are writing it down. So that's what this comes in. So you have the contact cards, like Shane's saying. I mean, you might have a smartphone and it has a little notepad, and the silent partner may be putting some notepads there, or he might even be recorded. I know one of my brothers that started the church there in Virginia, he actually has a recorder, and so he records the conversation, then he can write the information down after it's over with. So there's so much different technology we have now that we didn't have when I first started this kind of thing. But
like, for example, I remember when I went to Jamestown, New York, and there was a couple there. We talked about, there's so much religious division, and why is there so much religious division? Yeah. So we wrote that down to help me remember who that was.
Exactly. And it makes all the difference in the world. So that's that. And then the second thing I've got here is what's called a worker report form. Okay. And again, you can word it however you want to and put it together, but I got the name of workers is the first part, number of houses covered, number of people at home. That's really important, because you can go to 1,000 houses literally and maybe find 5 at home, or that will open the door.
Right.
And remember that too. In some areas. Now, again, don't use this as excuses, because a lot of people use excuses. Well, door campaigns don't work anymore. I can tell you right now, beyond a shadow of a doubt, any community, a door campaign will work. Now, some will be more receptive than others, but it will work. Because I've been in every single circumstance you can think of in door campaigns, and it will work, especially if you do this weekly thing I'm talking about. Because what happens is you start getting to know the folks in the community. They see you come the following Saturday, and some of them kind of get excited. And then they tell you, well, you know what? There's a person over here. And then they find out about, and before you know it, now all of a sudden you're being received into the community. See, so it's got number of houses covered, number of people at home, number of Bible studies conducted, number of Bible correspondence requested, number of new contacts, number of contacts recontacted. So, I know it's a lot of work as far as talent is concerned, but even Paul and Peter and others, they would assemble the church back together to make a report to the congregation on what all was accomplished while they were out there doing missionary work. So basically that's what we're talking about here. Try to accumulate the information, because you want to bring it back not only to the team so they can say, wow, even though my team hasn't really found anybody yet that's receptive, we got these folks over here, man, they've already had 2 Bible studies and 1 baptism. And so, I mean, it's like, if I just keep doing it, eventually that's going to happen for me as well, So that's what the worker report sheet is for. And then, of course, the pamphlets and tracts containing church information. When I was in Papua New Guinea, this is the only time I did overseas missionary work. I was at a college in Tennessee, and we actually went overseas as a mission team. And one of the guys that headed that up, his name was Joe Gray. Awesome gentleman. And when we went over there, they had already developed this little pamphlet they made themselves by hand. So I took the same idea, and I found somebody who knew how to draw a whole lot better than I know how to draw. And I just reworded things to kind of fit the way, with my experiences and all. Because remember, this was in New Guinea, so it's going to be just a little bit different, the way that you put some materials together in New Guinea than you would in the United States. And so I fashioned this, as you can see. And one of the things that caught my attention was, it was stick figure type stuff. Not exactly stick figure, but close to it. But it starts off, the story of Christ Church, or the Church of Christ. And then it has Adam and Eve and how they were with God, and they were separated from God. So it's basically giving you the whole story of the plan of salvation. And it's also a visual. So even children, can look at. But at the same time, and the reason why I like this is, it wasn't professionally printed. Now I want you to think about the concept of my using it. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with professional printing. That's fine. But my whole idea is that the more simple you keep things and the more homely you keep it, the more real it is to a lot of people. That's just my thinking, okay? So I put this together. It's got the story and everything. And then at the very end here, I got this little block here to where whichever congregation you're a part of, you just insert your information right here, and of course you write it in, so the stuff's already put together, and then you just write your information in there. And so every time I did a door campaign for a congregation, or every time I do, I will always then insert that information in there. You know? So that's something that you want to make sure that you have. Another thing that you want to have, so I'm usually what I encourage people to do is have about 100 contact cards, about 50 work report sheets, about 300 pamphlets or tracts with the church's information. And also, this is not mandatory, but I think anything that's helpful is, I say have 200 sorry we missed you door hangers. Now, you're talking about ancient now. This is ancient, right? Now, this is printed professionally. These are very expensive, so normally, normally I'd say just have a little sheet where you can just slide it into their door, and most of the time you can shut that, with the screen door on it. But if you want to go fancy, if you got a pretty good budget, then that is a kind of cool way to go, because it'll hang right there on the door, or you can actually slide it in there too, but it has the church's information on there. And of course, in this particular case, and this was a sample I got from the congregation where I grew up, it says, wonderful to go to Bible school, with an exclamation point. We were thinking of you, so there's just some things on there that to let them know that you were there, at their door. Correspondence courses. Now, we'll be talking about the Gospel Christ correspondence course. So you go to thegospelchrist.com and you'll see the correspondence course there. That was actually the correspondence course that I developed as a teenager, as I told you about in my experience there. But, I had my very first person I ever brought to Christ, he was trying his best to reach another fellow student of ours, and he had tried everything. And so he actually went with the Open Bible study, which originally was written by Ivan Stewart. So here's an example of those. Again, you're looking at getting into money when you start buying these types of things. So one of the things I like about our correspondence course, you just download it. Make as many copies as you want, you see. Yeah. But there are other methods of study. So you want to have methods available. Whatever the method is, as long as it's sound, and it's simple, and it's gets to the point. Like you can see this first lesson here in Open Bible Study. I mean, it's pretty brief, isn't it?
Yeah.
And mine's a little bit more lengthy than this, but the fact is that it's real easy to put in a packet, real easy to get to. If somebody finally says they want to have a study, then you can get to it and you can start doing the study. Okay, and then of course, so I'd have about 30 of those. And then, of course, you want to have some kind of contact manager or some way in which, I've used files, obviously, but now that we have computers, you would use, contact managers of some sort in your computer to be able to keep up with all the stats.
Microsoft Excel.
Yeah, Microsoft Excel and some of those types of things where it can help you with that. And then, of course, you're going to have the packets. Now, the packets that I use were a lot bigger than this, but I just want to have something at least to illustrate to you. But inside the packets, no doubt, you're going to already have a map. Now, I actually did what I did, and what I do is I go, and this takes a lot of time, burns a lot of gas, but whoever heads up the campaign, you go down to every street, you count the houses. I'm talking about before you even set the campaign up.
Wow.
Yeah. And what I did is I got a feel for the geography. I got a feel for how many houses. Now, the reason why I did that is because, listen, let's say, for instance, there's a bunch of houses together. Well, you could take a team and go ahead and put them on those houses, and you could park your car and go ahead and disperse them and let them hit all those houses, and you can go to the end of the street, and you're going to have quite a bit of time where they're going to be working, but at the same time they don't have to get picked up and let off, because that's a very highly concentrated area, whereas others may be spread far out. So, when you put your packet together, I mean, how many do I need as far as contact cards and so forth? You might only need 12 or 13 in one street because it's so spread out. You see, so you can actually get a feel. And I mean, this is somebody who's really going to put some time, obviously, and you don't have to do that, because I've done it before where you don't do that. I've had congregations before where time did not permit or whatever for us to do that. But so in your packet, you'll have this packet and you'll have the street name on it, and then you'll choose your teams before you go out, and then Shane's team, here's your street, and in that we'll have the map of how to get from the church building or wherever you are as you're putting your team together, and then you go out to your street, so you know how to get there. So you have the map and you have the street and everything, and I already know how many houses on there, and so you know how many flyers you're gonna pass out. So you have flyers in there, and then here's what you're talking about as far as notes.
Yeah.
And this is what I've always used, and you want a clipboard because you want a hard surface, right? Because it's kind of hard to write on your Bible. So you have your Bible, your clipboard, and this right here. And what I put on here, I call this name of street. And I've actually got a code system on here, and then I got all these lines here. So just to basically tell you, the initial code at NI means not interested. Now, you'll know if they're not interested or not. Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean down the road they might not obey the gospel, because at some point, as you're in the neighborhood on a weekly basis, at some point they'll be like, hey, by the way, your neighbor over here, they kind of feel bad they shut the door on you or whatever, and you might want to go by and see them again or something like that. So that does happen, Mm-hmm. But, your impression is they are totally not interested, Mm-hmm. In a lot of cases, you'll have that right there. The second is NH, which means not at home, and you'll get most of that. Most of the time you'll get that. And they may be at home, but they just won't open the door. And in some respects, we understand that. That's one of the reasons why you want to put something in the door before you leave, so they'll know you're not, some kind of robber or something like that. And initially, even if you put something in the door, they may still think there's something wrong with you. But if you go several weeks, then all of a sudden, now they're getting to know you, and they know you're not a robber or whatever. And then AH means they're at home. And of course, obviously, when you have that, each time you go down the road, okay, I go to this house, so I got the house number right here. This next column is code. So the code is either NI, NH, or AH. And then your comments. So let's say I go down to the first house, not home, NH. All right, I put the house number down, so that way I know the street. I already know the street because I got the name of the street on the top here. Then I know the house number, and I've got the code, not home. So I'm not going to make any comments, not at home. So I go to the next one. Well, guess what? They're at home, but they're not interested. So I put NI, I put the house number, and then I actually, if there's some way we had a conversation, they said I'm a Baptist, and I'm going to die a Baptist, and you're wasting your time or whatever, then you put that down, And then what happens over time is, guess what? Maybe there was somebody in your group that at one time was a Baptist. Or you say, you know what? As people begin to get used to us in this community, I'm going to go back to that door and I'm going to give them a muscle and shovel book. Mm-hmm. See what I mean? So that kind of helps you with things like that. And then, of course, I've got other ideas as well, like, you can put out, I came by to say hello and to invite you to the services of the congregation there, and you just put it there as a flyer, right? I am sorry I missed you. Now, again, this goes back many years where I wrote these things. I just came by to invite you to our gospel meeting, so there's another thing there. And then here's a lengthy little letter right here. And you'll notice it's in my handwriting. Mm-hmm. It's in my handwriting. Of course, I went ahead and copied it, no doubt, because there's no way to. But, I mean, if you could personalize it that way. Mm-hmm. Dear neighbor, we are thankful that you have allowed us into your homes and have been even shown us interest in visiting us at worship service. So it goes on into a bunch of stuff. And so, personalize it. That's the whole idea, is to personalize these things. And then, of course, if they do have a study with you or they visit a congregation, whatever, you send them a visitor's thing. And again, you'll notice all this stuff's homemade. Right. Because we're not corporate America, Shane. Now, some people want to do it that way. I mean, I'm not against that. I'm just saying my experience has been the more personalized you can make it, the better. Okay. So that's just some ideas on as far as the initial materials, and of course, as far as the office materials are concerned, you just want to keep those good records we were talking about.
Okay. What about the visitor materials?
Going back to what we talked about there, when you have a visitor come in, you got to make double sure that you have something to hand them when they come and visit in. You're going to send a thank you letter to them, after the week is up. You might even go back and visit them and just to thank them, and see what their interest level is. So you just want to make sure you have those materials. You want to make sure that you're ready to give them something to let them know what they expect when they're there at the worship, and then obviously send them a thank you letter. So any way you can reach out and touch with those types of things will make a big difference.
And follow up.
Follow up. That's the key. The key is the follow up. So you go back to the houses, or again, if you have a visitor, you make sure you follow up with either a visit or a call or a letter or all the above.
I've seen the case where sadly there was some good results, but there was no follow-up.
I'm glad you brought that up, because see, a lot of times people bring a team in, won't they? They'll be, we're from one state and we go to another state and we just, and I've done that too. And then like you said, then after that happens, no follow-up. And I'll tell you this right now, I have different, because we're associated with the gospel of Christ, and we're worldwide, and especially in the United States. I'll have people call and they'll say, hey, there's some folks in Alabama or Tennessee or Mississippi, the territories I cover, and they've responded to this, that, and the other. Could you somehow or another find somebody that could study with them, whatever? And I said, oh, yeah. So I'm so well connected now, and hopefully get more connected, that I can say, yeah, I know a perfect guy that I know will follow up, and I know if that guy will study with him, and this guy's receptive, he will obey the gospel if he's truly seeking the truth. And I have those kind of connections. But normally what these people will tell me is they'll say, well, man, you're one of the few people out there, because I'll call elders and I'll call, preachers, and they won't do anything.
Yeah.
And that, I'm telling you, folks, that's one of the reasons why we have this manual, is because we want to get the average person, including the preacher and the elders, doing personal evangelism, because we have some people who are working and they're getting responses, especially with the internet now, with YouTubes and things like that, where we got folks, pockets everywhere, that are saying, we want to study. And you had that experience, I think.
Yeah.
I know in Uganda and some other places too, where it's like, help.
Yeah, Virginia.
You had one in Virginia, that's right. So, we got to really ramp up the average member of the church sharing the gospel, because we got all these things that are happening thanks to a lot of the modern technology that we have today.
Do you want to talk about team spirit?
Yeah, I mean, the fact is, and I've talked about it a little bit already, but if you put together a personal evangelism team and you put together that kind of a work ethic, then you're going to get encouragement and excitement, and everybody will fit in. Everybody will fit in. I mean, it's there's going to be some people that'll be, maybe they're not mentally as sharp as some others. There's purposes for all kind of people. I could tell you stories where there's this one gentleman, there's no way under the sun he could fit in doing work here in the United States, and he went to Papua New Guinea and married a native there and was the most effective evangelist in Papua New Guinea. So, everybody doing his or her share causes growth of the body. Everybody being essential and important is what the Bible teaches.
And we're definitely fulfilling Galatians 6:2, bear one another's burdens.
Yeah, that's true, because there's some of that going on. We get fired up with each other. We kind of get irritated with each other sometimes too. And that's okay, because that's just part of it, It's just part of it.
All right. Well, we're going to continue our series in our third lesson, and we just want you to stay for that. And you want to mention anything about the Gospel of Christ?
Yeah, remember again to go to thegospelchrist.com and look under the study aids, the manual section there. You'll get the personal evangelism manual, and be sure to implement that. And let's all work together, team up together. We're all on God's team. We're all personal evangelism teams for God, and let's do it for the Lord.